to order and call upon Orla Tooth from Deloitte to address the House.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, everyone. My name is Orla Tooth. I'm a partner in Deloitte's Financial Services Tech and Transformation business here in Dublin. I studied business and German in Trinity, class of 2000, which for me just feels like yesterday, but for everyone else in the room, I know it feels like a long time ago when Y2K was, the biggest existential threat to the world. Having graduated, I moved to London. I spent over 22 years in London before returning to Dublin a couple of years ago. It is genuinely wonderful to be back in Trinity tonight, so thank you everyone for, on behalf of Deloitte, thank you everyone for the opportunity and welcome to the evening. Growing up, I loved debating, and I think the skills that I built through debating still stand to me in the day-to-day, structuring an argument, being ready with the comeback, always having a witty retort ready to go, or skills I use every day as a financial services partner dealing with regulators, CIOs, COOs of banks. So basically trying to influence smart people to change how they think and operate in established industries with really high stakes. So as the world's largest, with Maria over here as well, I'd be remiss of me not to mention Maria, but as the world's largest and fastest growing professional services firm, we spend a lot of time helping organisations get ready for disruption. It's normally sort of digital disruption, not like tonight, giant meteors traveling 70,000 kilometres an hour. But that said, I'm fairly sure that some of my colleagues, given the opportunity, will immediately suggest establishing a steering committee, building a dashboard, because we consultants probably believe that nothing prevents extinction more than some strong governance and some good KPIs. Tonight's motion is spectacular, and we are asked to imagine that we're a world-class journalist visiting the European Space Agency. We spot a suspicious file, take a little look, and discover there's a 75% chance that a meteor might wipe out humanity in 90 days. The debate before the House is, do we publish? And I think this motion raises several big questions that I'm sure will come up tonight. The moral question, so the journalist's duty to truth. The transformation question, can urgency sort of drive innovation and resource mobilisation to essentially spark unprecedented global cooperation to respond? And indeed the chaos question, publish and you risk panic, and don't publish and you risk extinction. So there's something beautifully, I think, appropriate about being here and debating in the Hist, such historic institution discussing futuristic ethical dilemmas. So I'm really, really excited for what's to come. So good luck everybody, and back to you.
Many thanks to Orla for your speech, and many thanks to Deloitte for their sponsorship. Much appreciated. I should now like to call upon the Record Secretary to read the minutes of the last public business meeting.
On the night before Halloween, 1938, Martians attacked New York City. Listeners to Orson Welles' War of the Worlds radio broadcast that night heard a realistic news bulletin describing the chaos, mayhem, and carnage that affected New York and across the East Coast of the United States. The only problem was that Orson Welles wasn't a real journalist. He was an actor performing an adaptation of a horror novella for a Halloween-themed broadcast. And there were no Martians, just a well-told scary story. But that didn't stop lots of real newspapers and real journalists from reporting on the purported mass hysteria that followed the broadcast that night. The next day, Welles had to stage a press conference to officially apologize for causing this supposed hysteria. And on that next Halloween day, the urban legend of the gullible radio listeners driven to looting and rioting over a seemingly impossible event was born. For decades, the War of the Worlds radio broadcast has told us a really good story about the impressionability of the public. If there had really been the mass hysteria Welles was accused of causing, that story would stand today. But eyewitness accounts don't indicate that there really was mass chaos, and there isn't a reliable record of looting or real panic. It was the later work of real and really unscrupulous journalists that made the story take off the way it did. Now, to some high-strung radio listeners, the Martians that night might have seemed real. But the public's response to Wells' story is almost as mysterious as the Martians themselves, half plausible and half exaggerated. The media created both the story of the Martians and the hysteria in response to them. But remember, in tonight's debate, the speakers are not actors, but real journalists. And the Martians are not Martians, but a very real, potentially devastating asteroid. The specter of public responsibility haunts all real journalists, as well as some deviant entertainers. Of course, the last private business meeting of the College Historical Society had very little to do with questions as important as the one these maidens are trying to answer tonight. Last week, we mostly talked about our plans to become the primary eco-terrorist cell in Dublin. As we discussed last week, it may be true that humanity already has a 75% likelihood of extinction in the near future, and no whistleblower has managed to get anything done about it in the 30-odd years they've been trying. So taking the premise for tonight's debate as seriously as Orson Welles took his completely fake reporting, I'm very honored to conclude the minutes of the last private business meeting as acting record secretary and make way for the speakers themselves to debate the motion before the House. Thank you.
Are there any objections to my signing the minutes of the true and accurate account of the last public business meeting? Then I shall do the sign. I should now call upon the auditors to introduce the standing orders for this evening.
It's still me, guys. Okay, so tonight's speeches are 7 minutes in length, with the first minute being protected time. At the end of the first minute, you're going to hear a ding from Owen. Show us. Really good. Which means that POIs or questions can be offered. And then you'll hear another ding at the last minute, which means that you are back in protected time. At the end of your speech, you will hear 2 dings, which means your time is up. And at 7 minutes, 15 seconds, you'll hear 3 dings, and the judges over there are going to put their hands up, and it means that they can't track anything else that you say. We do encourage audience participation in hears and shames, but for this debate, we ask that nobody in the audience offers POIs, because we do have to consider just the things said by our speakers tonight. Cool? Awesome. All right, thanks, guys.
Because this is a competitive debate, and there will be a winner at the end of the debate, the speakers will all give some additional context about the motion, which is as follows. One more time. You're a well-known journalist with international reputation working for a big firm called the Mirish Times. You visit the European Space Agency headquarters to write a piece on the workplace, a suspicious-looking file on desk, and the moment of indulgence, you go through the file and find evidence of a meteor coming to hit Earth in 3 months. There's a 75% chance of wiping out the population. The question before the House this evening is, this House will put it in print, and I should now like to call upon the first speaker to propose the motion in the House.
Members of the House, it is my privilege to stand before you this evening to open this debate and propose the motion this House would put it to print. Tonight in this debate, we are embodying a journalist with great responsibility upon their shoulders, facing a competition of morals, a contemplation of journalistic integrity and an ethical dilemma. Undoubtedly, this journalist owes a duty to the public. But tonight, we debate if that duty is to release the truth or deceive the public. As side proposition, we will be demonstrating by no uncertain means that this is not only the right thing to do, but the best course of action, to publish this vital information, to let the people decide. Side opposition tonight will surely focus on an Armageddon, a breakdown of society and chaos that may ensue, with the knowledge the world may be ending in 3 months' time, encompassing all the mass hysteria akin to panic buying toilet roll or looting we have seen in years gone by. However, I truly believe this would not be the case. We cannot allow the opposition's exaggerated, pessimistic possibilities to influence our reason. If I asked you 10 years ago what the effect of a global pandemic might have been, you would have given me a similar answer: chaos, calamity, carnage. But no, in reality we saw global cooperation, community values re-emerging, and innate human decency shining through the tragedy. In the face of a society-ending meteor, I believe our humanity would once again shine through. People would take stock of their lives, as we did in quarantine, and appreciate, truly appreciate what we have done, who we have come to know. Appreciate the best of our lives, our friends, and our family. We could use those final 3 months to enjoy what's left, make the most of life, tick off our bucket lists, finally do the things we've been putting off until retirement. Take a chance to come to terms with the possibility of death. Rather than panic madly, we would finally be at peace when the time does come. People fear the unknown, panic at the face of uncertainty. If anything, more chaos would ensue if the public were not warned and then finally see the meteor approaching. But as the journalist, if I choose to deny that information, so too would I be denying everyone the opportunity to enjoy those final 3 months. They would have almost no warning. Think of all the interactions last ended in arguments. Yes?
How would you feel if every time you looked into your mother's eyes, you knew that in 3 months you'd be nothing but dirt in the ground?
How would you feel if you were on the other side of the world from your mother and you see a meteor raining down and you don't have the chance to say goodbye? I would argue that is much worse. Think of the interactions last ended in arguments, bitter words said in the heat of anger. We have all experienced this. We all eventually cool down, make amends, and express the insincerity of what we have said. Now imagine, as I mentioned, you've argued with your mother, shouting the usual, "I hate you," or threatening emancipation. Or maybe that's just me. Then, having stormed out of her house with anger hours previous, you look to the sky and you see a meteor raining down. In your final moments, what do you experience? Regret, guilt, shame. If only I could have taken back those awful words. So who am I, as the journalist, to decide that fate? To decide on what terms you end your relationships with your loved ones? In the words of Neville Cox, journalists are the bloodhounds and watchdogs of our society. Throughout my speech, I've focused on what right does the journalist have to deny information to the public. Our job is to expose the truth, to report on matters of public interest. As a journalist, you pursue your passion for the truth. You undertake the vital duty and commit yourself to this ideal. The opposition will likely argue, what right does the journalist have to publish it in the first place? Well, the Global Charter of Ethics for Journalists lists the right of the public to truth as the first duty of a journalist. The journalist, quote, shall not suppress vital information. And yes, while in this instance, the information might not have been obtained in the most ethical manner, it does not diminish its significance. Sometimes the ends do justify the means. If journalists were to always play by the rules, we would never have seen such scandals as Watergate or the Snowden controversy exposed. In a system where valuable information is actively covered up, actively withheld, we need journalists pursuing the facts however necessary. In the words of Harry Truman, imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. Who am I as a journalist to play God? To withhold this information is to decide if humanity should have the time to prepare, to grieve, to come to terms with their potential extinction. Who am I to deprive them of their last moments together? On side proposition, we believe in public autonomy. Provide them with the information. Let them decide how they will act, react, or cope. Ignorance is not always bliss. We do not have the right to decide for anyone. We have a duty to expose the truth, enlighten the masses, provide the material information. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. Journalistic reputation and ethical codes of conduct are a fly in the face of such a world-ending event. We have a right to know, a right to publish, a right to inform. Members of the House, I implore you, propose this motion.
Thank you very much for that excellent start to our debate. I would now like to call upon Rory Bates to continue the debate.
Dear Hist, we have found that the world we live in may come to an end. A meteor has a serious chance of wiping out all of mankind, and today the opposition will prove conclusively, why this information should not be published, and that the proposition will only cause further harm with a reckless disclosure of an apocalyptic event. I have 2 points to prove today, that being 1, the mass hysteria that will accompany the publication, and 2, the importance of leaving this cosmic calamity up to the experts. But first, a little bit of rebuttal. Prop 1, great speech. However, it is your belief that it is necessary for us as a journalist to expose this thing. But can you really reconcile some kind of idea of journalistic integrity with causing this entire breakdown in society? It will not be toilet paper looting you cause. This isn't COVID we're dealing with. It is the probable end of our species as we know it. You say that most people will appreciate their final moments, but you're assuming that most humans are not irrational. I'm a history student, so while I will never get a job, I know humanity's vile acts better than anyone. This is Armageddon we're dealing with, not COVID. People kill over religion, money, family feuds. You expose these people to the worst news ever. And as I will show, taking toilet paper will turn into taking lives. Now, my first point is that the publication of this apocalypse will cause mass hysteria on a global scale that will likely finish off the rest of humanity should it even survive this meteor. Because let's face it, humans can be very rational in the face of danger, and there's nothing more dangerous than a giant meteor hurtling towards Earth that can end all life. PY.
We do not argue that hypothetical situations always present greater panic than when they actually materialize.
Well, you could say that about most events that have happened in humanity, like the plague, warfare. People break down because of the shock that's caused. This is the most shocking thing we've ever heard of ever. It's the end of all humanity. People aren't going to react normally to that, no matter how many ways you put it. Okay? So look, 8 billion people are all now realizing the apocalypse is on its way, and they and everyone they know are probably going to die. Because 75% chance that humanity is wiped out does not mean there's a 1 out of 4 chance that no one will die. It's only a 1 out of 4 chance that humanity as a species will survive. That could be anything to 1 billion people to 10,000. So you are just basically guaranteeing to everyone that they will die. Do you honestly think people will react normally to that? Hell no! The apocalypse is now public knowledge because of the proposition's recklessness. The possibility of humanity falling apart before the meteor even hits are out of this world. Little space joke there. So, okay. Impacts. Religion will cause international havoc, right? Christianity, Islam, and many other religions believe in an apocalypse. And in the face of a real apocalypse, religious radicalism will explode because people will try and guarantee their place in an afterlife because of the end times. Radicalism and violence always come hand in hand. The idea of doomsday cults already exists and always ends in mass violence, like the People's Temple mass suicide in Jonestown or open warfare from the Branch Davidians in Texas. Publishing this real doomsday legitimizes the religious apocalypse, turning religions into cults 1 billion people strong. Religious annihilation is guaranteed in Props World. And it will be a political nightmare too. Nations will fall as economies crash, societies break down because most leaders, the police, the army, they all not give a shit anymore because, spoiler alert, the world's probably going to end. Prisons will let out all their criminals. Countries are going to fire nukes into space. Elon Musk is going to sell ticket to Mars. Like, Jesus. People will just be really annoying about it. This meteor will be blamed on George Soros, the Jews, transgender people, and that's just Fox News. Our possible final few months of politics, national and international, will be an absolute embarrassment. And regular life will just get worse. You have social disorder en masse because crazy people will do crazy shit. It will be the downfall of healthcare systems, shopping, breakdown of regular comforts and services because no one wants to do them anymore. It will be mostly murder, rape, everyone running around naked, all right? Like full immorality unburdened by punishment or society. No, thank you. Unimaginable acts will occur. Mass suicides of whole families as people try to save their children and spouses from fiery annihilation. Telling the world that all going to die will in many ways guarantee it, even if it's not certain. So why is opposition in the right? Because we let humanity live in blissful ignorance without fear of annihilation hanging over their heads for their 3 months remaining. We don't promote fundamentalism or warfare. We just do nothing and let people go on about their day. The conflict that I have shown exists in Props World does not exist in ours. Their world ensures humanity massacres each other before we all die anyways. Ensures we spend our final days in anger and misery. Ensures we're remembered by future civilized species as stupid warmongers. And they're right, because humans on average are quite stupid. But we avoid that embarrassment in opposition's world. Humanity remains largely unaware of the end, and we don't descend into madness in our final days. We end on a high note rather than a low note, and if we do survive, we at least avoid the embarrassment of societal collapse, or temporary societal collapse. So opposition's world might also be hit by the meteor, but we at the very least avoid looking stupid. But Rory, you'll ask excitedly, how is shutting about the apocalypse going to make things any better? Shouldn't we let people know so they can maybe prepare for it? Well, I have something even better. What if by saying nothing, we could stop it from even happening at all? That leads on to my second point. Let's leave it to the experts. Where do we find this information? In the headquarters of the European Space Agency. And if anyone knows space, it's organizations like them, like America's NASA and China's CNSA. Organizations like these have been working throughout their entire existence to prepare for impending asteroids and other cosmic horrors, studying countless examples of meteor impacts and trajectories to come up with plans to minimize their effects or even prevent them from reaching Earth entirely. I mean, it certainly isn't without precedent. In 2023, NASA successfully altered the path of an asteroid with a spacecraft within the DART program. So these organizations are designed to protect Earth from threats like this meteor. Sure, PY, quickly.
The majority of these space agencies can model asteroids for a long time. Therefore, they've chosen not to do anything. So would that not suggest some sort of conspiracy?
How do you know that they're not doing anything? You only know that the asteroid is coming, right? And we have 3 months. 3 months to try and save humanity. That's actually quite a lot of time if all the space agencies unite to try and stop it. Because there's a very good chance that we actually do, because we've done before and we can do it again, especially when the fate of humanity is at stake. So what are the meteor impacts? Another little space joke there. You allow these orgs to continue their work in peace. In the 3 months between your discovery and the estimated impact, there's a great chance that the ESA or similar organization has a good plan for successfully deflecting this meteor or minimizing it. After all, it's in their best interest, right? If they don't save the world, they won't get paid. And if they do avert this catastrophe successfully, there's no need to tell anyone ever. Humanity can live on forever, blissfully unaware of how we all almost died. These orgs will also be fully unimpeded from the populace if we don't publish the info. They don't have to listen to those annoying billionaires like Musk or Bezos and their capitalistic ideas of how to stop the meteor with a profit incentive. They don't have to navigate around wars of resources or be blamed for the meteor by conspiracy theorists or be attacked by religious freaks who actually want the world to end. They will continue their work in peace with full efficiency because we don't publish it. And if Prop get their way, well, it's without a doubt guaranteed that this meteor does hit Earth, okay? All the examples that I mentioned a moment ago, which don't exist on our side of the argument, will be brought to life by Prop, opening their mouth and telling the whole world, we're all going to die. Our space agencies no longer have the serenity or safety to operate and build towards saving the world and are beholden to and barraged by tech bros and theocrats in a war-torn world. The average person is irrational when faced with the near certainty of death, and we tell everyone it will only hurt chances of a better future, of an actual future. That is Prop's world. Opposition avoids this entirely by keeping this secret to ourselves and giving our species' brightest minds the chance to succeed in saving Earth by shutting the hell up. Opposition has a clear-cut path to victory, as I've outlined. Our goal is to avoid the religious and political fervour of mankind lashed out in the end times and allow our scientists to work in peace and harmony and maybe even avoid the apocalypse altogether. Prop's goal is to make humanity end with a loud bang and display our worst traits as we give up on our morality in the face of almost certain extinction. A fate so miserable and depraved that I hope the meteor does indeed wipe out the entire world that you've created. So let's not end up like the dinosaurs. Vote for a sane world, a safer world, a world that is worth saving. And that world only exists on the opposition side. I beg you to oppose.
Starting off the side so well, I will now call upon David Jones.
Good evening to the floor at large. My name is Ella Jones-Burke, and my speech tonight will hinge upon the deprivation that goes in tandem with deciding not to release this information. To refuse to publish is to sit back and deprive the world of both hope and of love. First, I will discuss how refusing to publish this knowledge is preventing a solution and international collaboration, the impact of which could stretch far beyond this impending catastrophe. And secondly, I will explain how, if we were all to die in the next 3 months, to rob us of the chance to say final goodbyes would be robbing many of their dying wishes. For my first point, I believe that in deciding not to release this information, I, as the journalist, would be taking a highly pessimistic stance on the progress humanity has made in recent decades, as I would be refusing to believe in the capabilities of our global society to create a solution. In telling the world that we as a population have a mere 3 months to save the human race, the chance of a solution that would save us from this asteroid gets exponentially bigger. With over 8 billion people on this planet, I find it hard to believe that we as a collective could not figure out how to save us from this asteroid. While many examples of the greatest human feats in preceding years may not have had the best intentions, it cannot be denied that humans have incredible minds, and we have and will continue to convert this power into innovation. Both individually and via collaboration, humans have figured out artificial intelligence, the atomic bomb, cloning, virtual reality, IVF, cryogenic freezing, space travel, and the list goes on. Yeah.
Do you not think the space agencies will be basically as well set up to deal with this consequence than 8 billion people?
I'm actually going to touch on this further in my speech, so I will come back to that, thank you. Furthermore, these examples of human innovation occurred without the pressure of knowing that the entire human population is likely to be wiped out in 3 months. This added pressure would spark the most creative ideas and driven work seen heretofore. In fact, we have recently witnessed our innate human ability to respond to life-threatening pressure in the swift turnaround of the COVID vaccine, rolled out to the world mere months after its outbreak. Thanks to the vaccine, we are all now sitting in this room together without masks and fear of contamination, and without a risk of death. We have saved countless lives under duress before, and we could do it again, thanks to our instinct to innovate, but only if this information goes to print. By collaborating as a population, gathering the greatest minds from all over the world to work together, I am confident that we could find a way to mitigate or eradicate the incoming death toll. It may seem unrealistic, but how realistic would artificial intelligence and cryogenic freezing have seemed before these mere concepts came to realization? And while it may sound idealistic to imagine a global coming together, especially considering rising international tensions across the globe, I am firm in my stance that a fear of imminent death for each person, and perhaps more crucially, for each person's loved ones, provides enough motivation to momentarily park international tensions for the sake of literal human preservation. Thank you. Furthermore, in limiting this information to just the European Space Agency, as the first opposition suggests, I would be limiting the scope of ideas to just the specialists. Yes, this may sound perfect on paper. Let the experts trained and educated on this subject focus distraction-free on impending doom. Yet to confine this information to just those with the best, most expensive education is reducing the pool of ideas to those that have been curated from the same base of knowledge, as many of these professionals will have followed more or less the same path. By releasing this news, ideas from people from every walk of life will be brought into the fold. The genius who has not been able to afford third-level education but can think faster than any expert. The science fiction novelist who has already created the perfect solution. The children with wider imaginations than we can dream of. This fear of death can be the ultimate unifier, which can, if we let it, span across the world and give a voice to the opinions of marginalized communities not typically brought into these global conversations. Not to be blunt, but we would have nothing to lose. And one of these ideas, when backed by scientific innovation, might just save us. Why would I, in keeping this information hidden, deprive us of a solution? Yes?
Do you think 3 months would be long enough for these people with no education about space to meaningfully contribute to this?
Well, if we look at how fast the COVID vaccine turned around, and I know that there was a medical history of vaccines before, we have seen a similar turnaround before, and I think with the amount of space travel and innovation that's happened in recent decades, I do believe that there is enough backing to create a solution. The impact of this momentary collaboration not only has the potential to save all of us, but could also have a much more permanent effect on world peace. In the hypothetical scenario that we do save ourselves and each other by working together, I believe there is a large possibility that a greater level of international peace would follow. What else could bring people together better than working alongside your enemy to save each other and each other's families? I believe a worldwide alliance like this would create empathy and compassion on a greater scale than ever seen before. Therefore, if the 25% chance of us surviving this asteroid were to occur, we would end up in a far better position than we would be in had I decided not to release this information. In this 25% case scenario, releasing the information has the potential to bring a huge positive in the form of literal world peace and the power to stop any future catastrophes of a similar nature, as we would have a solution. The impact of not releasing the information in the scenario where we are not affected by this asteroid is a net neutral, no gain. Surely based on this chance of an international cooperation and inclusion alone, this debate is a no-brainer. Yet the likelihood is, in this debate, that we will get hit by a fatal asteroid. So in that case, I have already proven that releasing the information exponentially increases our chance of survival. Yet the possibility that I have not yet given attention to is that our efforts to collaborate are not successful. In this case, I maintain that we as autonomous individuals have the right to know if there is a certain timeline attached to our lives. While many last acts that people may want to complete have been mentioned by my fellow speaker, I want to hone in on what is many a dying person's last wish, and that is saying goodbye to loved ones. Releasing this information affords people the opportunity to make amends with loved ones, make trips to go and see loved ones abroad. The impact that this will have for so many people might be hard to reconcile, because as grim as it is, in this scenario, we're all likely to die anyway, right? What does one last goodbye matter? But you could apply this logic to any dying person's wish. We all deserve to go in peace and surrounded by those we love, and for many that is their sole dying wish. Failing to inform the world of this risk, which in this scenario is drawing ever closer, is stripping us all of the chance to go in love, surrounded by those we care about. I firmly believe that being beside our loved ones, who ground us and remind us of our best values, would counteract the chaotic, reactive, and angry world suggested by First Op. The impact of being beside the people that we love most might not hold any weighting 1,000 years after the asteroid, when Earth as we know it has not existed for centuries and there's no one left to remember it or anyone on it. But that does not discount the true human impact that allowing people to be with their most beloved in their last few weeks and as we pass would have for each and every one of us. In conclusion, I truly believe that informing the world about this danger is crucial to lessening the risk, potentially saving 8 billion lives. We have seen human greatness before when it comes to life-altering innovation, and we can replicate it, especially with high stakes and pressure. Not only could this solve the problem at hand, but inspire future generations of peace. And in the occasion that this does not work, I still believe it is crucial to release this information to allow for last connections, amendments, and love to spread throughout the world as it goes down. Thank you.
Many thanks for that speech. I now call on David McCarthy, the next speaker, to continue the debate.
David, before we get going, will you just please ask me to speak up as well so that the panel can hear you, especially.
Understood. The laptop screen isn't turning on. 1 second. Here we go. Okay. This debate so far is pretty marginal. Yes, proposition. Many people will prioritize spending time with their loved ones and forming valuable memories. Conversely, on opposition, many people would not be capable or willing to process the situation in this way, and they will mentally break down in some way. No matter how much logic proposition gives you about why everyone will or should react in some way, remember this. The Earth is not made up of 8 billion clones. We live in an incredibly diverse world. Each single one of our brains has totally different inclinations, tendencies, and backgrounds. Also bear in mind that if published, this would be a time of extreme crisis. People are thus even less predictable and even less likely to fall in line with step-by-step logical arguments. In general, trying to win this debate by giving complex characterizations about the reaction of society is about as speculative gets. I think to resolve this debate, we need to zoom way out of people's heads and into the actual realistic large-scale consequences of revealing this information. My case can be summarized like this. Metaphorically, the world stops turning. Putting this into print will quickly lead to the wide-scale unavailability of electricity, food, and medicine, destroying people's lives regardless of their psychological tendencies. First, a quick piece of actor characterization, just in case it's later contested. The most important stakeholder to us in this debate is the people in the world, because what is on the line here is likely the last 3 months of human history. I cannot think of a single better counterbalance to selfish interests, not to mention that my impacts also apply to the actor and his family. Okay. The first thing I want to illustrate is that the running of services is series linked. You can think of it like a chain. If one link breaks, it no longer functions. Today, we no longer live in a world in which there's a farm that can feed everyone nearby 20 minutes away, or where there's a well for everyone in the town centre. No matter how urgent the situation, we have built a world in which to distribute food, for example, you need a farmer, an aggregator, a wholesaler, a shipper, port loaders, transit, people leaving transit, people giving clearance, domestic transit, warehouse workers, retailers, and then customers. These are tough and often boring jobs, many of which require years of training and supervision. Most people rely on systems like these for most things in life. These systems require multiple people to quickly and consecutively complete tasks they've been trained to do, including complex physical operations, real-time coordination, and crucially, exception handling roles. If understaffed, these systems will either slow to a crawl or break completely because of limitations coming from cognitive bandwidth, exhaustion, and simply not being able to be in 2 places at once. As we have heard, there will be a variety of reactions to this information, such as prioritizing family time, engaging in hedonism, maybe even turning to religion. My op case doesn't need you to buy into any crazy psychopathic antisocial behavior as Prop 1 would prefer. The question I want you to ask yourself is, under any of these characterizations, how many of these workers are going to want to finish out their lives working in the supply chain? Apart from the characterization reasons I've referenced, 2 reasons more why they won't. 1, they're not frontline workers like doctors or firefighters, and therefore lack both societal pressure to keep them working and strong group duty ethics. trades. And 2, bear with me here, this information would lead to everyone withdrawing their money from banks, which would be unstoppable because of potential backlash. This would in turn lead to a global liquidity crisis, which means the employers have no access to credit, which means the employees can't be paid. Although it's not like most of them care anyway, right? So the vast majority of these workers will just slip away to live the rest of their lives to the fullest, however that may be. Even if somehow only a few of them quit, what happens when a specialized operator or coordinator in the ESB walks out? What happens when logistics and distribution managers in the pharmaceutical industry leave? What happens when a plant can no longer be safely run because they're missing some staff? And again, remember that chain from earlier. What happens when supplies, fuel, parts can't even be properly transported to where they need to be? Starting with food, dry goods last maybe a week or two. You can try flocking to a wholesaler while it's still stocked for a few weeks, but you better hope you're fast enough to beat everyone else to it. For a few weeks, it looks like general discomfort and rationing, World War II style. Then it looks like mass hunger, and in the worst cases, famine. Rural centres that rely on small supermarkets will quickly have to flee to where everyone else is, exacerbating the crisis. Urban centres everywhere, where supermarkets have the fastest food turnovers, will run out of stock very quickly, and the supply chain will no longer be adequate to replace it. Not to mention that food insecure countries that rely on constant imports, like in Africa and the Middle East, will plunge into mass starvation. Yeah, go for it.
If this is true, after a week, won't people go, my life is pretty bad, and there'll be a global campaign to get everyone back working so that their life isn't as bad?
It won't work. People have 3 months to live. Enough people don't particularly care about any of this because, they're going to die anyway for this not to happen. Secondly, the damage is already done. It's not like once you stop the global supply chain, you can just suddenly get it back running without any hitches. In fact, it would likely take about 6 months for it to get back running properly. So none of this works. Okay.
POI.
No, thank you, no more. What about electricity? Again, this system is a complex balancing act that relies on a large number of operators making real-time decisions. The room for redundancy here is very low. The absence of one specialist role could force the whole unit to be shut down. And crucially, again, like every other primary and secondary industry, they are completely dependent on fuel deliveries and maintenance. In the absolute best world, it is still undeniable that power will be disrupted and outages will be widespread. So in this generous scenario, what are the impacts? Power, as increasingly unstable as it is, must be prioritized for essential services like hospitals, water treatment, refrigeration. There will nevertheless be intermittent failures in these crucial systems. This looks like most hospital care becoming inviable due not just to understaffing but also electricity rationing. So it looks like no electricity in your house. It means the sewage doesn't work properly. It means the water's unsafe. It means the food and medicine in the warehouse fridge spoils. And remember, all of this taking place in the developed world. Within days of the announcement, the countries I mentioned earlier will go from limited food, electricity and water, to no food, no water, no electricity, no hospital care. To summarize the 4 key thrusts of this case. 1, most people, and especially people working in supply chains, don't love their job. 2, whether you buy the prop or the op characterizations, the vast majority of people will not continue to, or will not come back to, as Prop 3 suggested, be a cog in a faceless machine, and they will break out of it to do whatever it is they personally want to do. 3, the consequences of even a small minority leaving in many sectors are drastic, because A, these systems are series linked, meaning a failure in one node in delivery breaks the chain, and B, many roles in operations are specialized and require significant training, creating ready-made choke points. 4, you run on backups for a few days or weeks, depending on where you live, and then the consequences of this worldwide are as follows. A, famine, B, loss of water access, C, loss of electricity, and D, loss of medical care. So, proposition, how well do you think even the most fortunate people will be able to tick off their bucket list and spend good time with their families under these medieval conditions of hunger and struggle? And what would you say to the most vulnerable in the world whom you condemn? What would you say to me, a diabetic, when I die within weeks because insulin can't be transported here quickly enough and requires constant refrigeration? You see, House, a vote for proposition turns this likelihood of death for many people from 75% in 3 months to 100% in 1 month, and condemns the others to a sharp decrease in material quality of life while they watch the rest of the world die on the news. The worst case comparative is 3 more months of this painful but beautiful thing we call human life before going out in the most badass way possible. Here's to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed to the next speaker, please.
Before I start, I'm in the fun debating situation of prepare 2 arguments. First speaker stands up, says the first one. Second speaker stands up, says the second one. So, excuse me if I'm a bit incoherent. I do have some important stuff to add, though, in case so don't count me out yet, panel back there. So far, everything that Proposition has been talking about is presenting a pretty grim world. What they're forgetting to remember is that we are living in it. A few things to start off, just some characterization. I think, what does this report look like? I think it's not just like, oh, there's a 75% chance we die, right? I think most people have conceded so far in this debate that the asteroid's pretty much going to hit us regardless of this like 75% chance. I'm going to contest this a little bit later, but there are some reasons I would have given for that. But I think ultimately, how a meteor is going to kill people is not just like the world is going to explode, it's going to go out in like a fireball in like a badass way like David tells you. I think it's the dust cloud. It's sending a shit ton of material into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun, stopping crops being able to grow for food. That is how it's going to kill us. I think this is a much more manageable thing to be able to deal with than Prop might have you believe. Finally, just on the idea that this information is not likely to be very known, for the simple reason that, like, guys, we found this on some dude's fucking desk. Like, this is, and also it's a suspicious looking file. Like, it's like, oh, I'm like the evil file that like knows all this like bad information. I think ultimately it's unlikely to be like actively hidden on a large scale. I think this is new information that these people have just discovered and are scared of releasing for whatever reasons you might believe. On some rebuttal then of what Rory said, I think his entire case just sort of relies on the idea like, are people really naturally brought to do violence? Like, if I told you I'm going to diagnose you with like terminal brain cancer, are you just going to go out and like punch me in the face? I just don't think most people have that incentive. I think most people are good people. They're going to want to do something good with the last few moments of their lives. They're going to want to do stuff that makes them feel good. Sure.
If 8 billion people had terminal brain cancer, you think all of them would go happily?
I think maybe there are going to be some that turn to like cults. I think maybe there are going to be some that are going to do like bad things. But I think the thing you're missing here is this is not a question of if, but when. What do you think they're going to happen when they see the giant fucking flaming rock in the sky? I think the panic is going to be much worse if you do it that way. I think the panic is going to be significantly like, if you actually see this threat sort of further down the line, there's going to be far worse rioting, there's going to be far more societal panic, and a lot more of the harms that you talk about. I think at best the impact you can claim is 2 more months of like normal life. I don't really see why this is particularly important, especially as I will explain. So, why are we going to be really sad if we don't release this information? And this hasn't been touched on at all, except like sort of by David, but not really. I think it's pretty clear, like, as a journalist, especially as one to have gained international recognition, we have a very strong moral compass. We sort of believe in these ideas of journalistic integrity, of the public having a right to know about this sort of information. And so I would posit, like this was brought up by the first speaker, but I'm sort of expanding on it. If we don't reveal this info, there will be a massive, unavoidable feeling of horrible guilt that we will feel. I think this is the most certain impact in this debate. People are positing like society is going to collapse, or people are going to riot, or people are going to be happy. I think all of these things are very speculative. I think our personal emotions, not only are they very proximate to us, but they are the most certain thing. Because as we think about it, guilt is an irrational emotion. Even if Prop's harms are speculative, we are going to think about the worst case scenario or the best case scenario. It's the coulda, the shoulda, the woulda. Focus on the best. Like, for example, we're going to think of the people who are going to like hug their mother in their final moments, who aren't going to be able to otherwise. We're going to think of like the nuclear bombs being able to deflect the asteroid, even if that might not be the case. I think for the final 3 months of our lives as this journalist, I don't want to be feeling this kind of guilt. I don't want to live the last 3 months of my life knowing I have let my ideals down, knowing that I have potentially condemned humanity to certain doom. Do you really want to live yeah, so now on some ideas on how we might like save the world. This was touched on by the previous speaker, as I said. I think I have some unique stuff to say about this. So, as I said, this is not a very well-known piece of info, right? It's not like widely spread out throughout the governments. And I think if we're going to try and like leave this to the experts, as they say, I think this is just going to take way too long. Trying to actually keep this like secret, like on the down low from everyone, is a very bureaucratic process. The actual communications is going to take a long time. I think putting it in print is by far the most efficient way of sort of collectivizing the entire sort of global action in terms of actually working towards a potential solution. 7 reasons why collective action is likely. First of all, I think some people will probably like pressure the government in order to like do something. I don't think everyone is going to lose hope when they see the 75% chance. I think these simulations are going to see that like we could potentially do something about this. There's not a 100% chance we're going to die, and they're going to pressure our governments to do something. Secondly, I think the people within these governments are going to want to do something about this because, again, like we're going to fucking die if they don't. Like that seems kind of pretty important. Thirdly, I think this was also talked about about. I think international relations, like tensions, aren't really important. Like the US and Russia aren't going to care a whole lot about that if like the US and Russia aren't going to exist in 3 months' time if we don't do anything. Secondly, I think people are naturally going to look towards like strong leaders towards these sort of times who like help them. And yes, maybe in like minority cases, they're going to be like cult people. But I think the people who are going to be propagated to the top are going to be the politicians leading the efforts to save humanity, are going to be the individuals who are going to try and like do all of these good things to help us. But finally, we're going to get the private sector involved, who has far more like human and like financial capital, who are going to be able to do this. This looks like industries, research institutions who have far more resources at their disposal. On the comparative, we have more people, we have more resources. We importantly have better communication. If this asteroid lands and we have this massive dust cloud around the place and people are starving, I think ultimately like that's going to destroy a lot of satellites. It's going to be really hard for governments around the world to actually talk to each other. I think we have this better on our side of the house if we're able to actually get this message across quicker. What does this efforts to help this look like? It looks like massive investment into genetically researched crops which grow with less sunlight. It looks like building of greenhouses to grow enough food for people. It looks like mass rationing of food to store for people for the like long winter that's going to come. It looks like evacuation of the crash site. It looks like firing nuclear bombs into the asteroid to potentially deflect it off course, because I would remind you that doing this earlier, it means that angle is going to like cause more of a deflection in that meteor and is more likely to actually go off course. And I would note the impact here, panel, because I will admit all of this does sound a bit crazy and a bit speculative, but the fact that I can think of all of these things, the fact that I can rationalize all of these ways that humanity could help, that people could be better off, I think that is ultimately what we will be thinking about in our final 3 months of life. I think that is what is going to be on our mind when this asteroid hits the ground. That is what is going to constantly be going through our head once in our final moments of life. Do we really want this, panel? Do we want to spend the last few moments of our life lamenting the fact that we have violated our core ideals? Do we want to spend these last few moments knowing we have let the people down, knowing that we could have saved them, knowing that we could have given these people the chance to live in the moment, to appreciate life for one last time, to spend their last days informed and knowing what it is they're doing? I don't think this is what the journalist wants, panel. I think you should put it in print. Thank you.
The thought of death, of everything you have done, you have been, you've experienced, you've loved, being ripped away from you with no remainder of what you once poured your everything into, it hurts, and it is unbearable. The only thing that shields us from this pain is our ignorance to death, that we forget and time slips us by and we don't know when it'll come for us. The moment we do know, when we are reminded constantly of our looming death dates, our hearts and our souls break into a million pieces until we are nothing but breathing corpses mourning the living. I bring you, panel, a humble argument. Our openings say, yes, maybe some people stop working. Maybe there is mass hysteria and people start murdering each other. But I think a very certain thing that happens in this debate is that people have people that they love, have things that they love, and this is going to bring them immense pain when they know that this is going to be taken away from them. When our wider societies come to the realization that they only have 3 months left, they will spiral into nihilism, and the guilt for their suffering will eat you alive as the actor in this debate, knowing you are the sole cause of all this hurt and all this chaos. Firstly then, an important thing to consider is why the public is going to believe you when you publish this news. Notice how my first opposition tells you that people are going to spiral, but they can't spiral unless they actually believe what you are telling them. The reason why they do this is, firstly, your story, it's interesting. When you don't seem like clickbait, the information you will relay to these people seems like something I'd want to read. The end of the world, certified by the ECA, we are curious by nature. But then, given that you are known by both an academic community and journalism, but maybe even to the average person who likes to keep on top of their news, people are unlikely to just dismiss you as a person who would just have the incentive to lie, so you look credible. Additionally, you publish on the behalf of a just as well-respected news organization. Your headlines, they have data, statistics, factual language, unlike what a fake news story would have. And then comes the academics. The research institutions, the independent nerds who like to read about space, the scientists that see your data and test the evidence themselves, they realize that you are right. They publish their own writings on how this is in fact true, increasing the amount of people that read and believe the news itself. Other space agencies chime in. NASA, ISRO, ASA, rooted in transparency and the greater good of mankind, will show the evidence to be factual. Subsequently, the countries follow, demanding the ESA to verify their claims, worried for their citizens, furious about not being notified of such catastrophic events, and the ECA has nowhere to turn but the truth and admits that the evidence is real. And lastly, the most powerful convincer of them all, social media. With actual evidence being backed by thousands of credible sources, millions upon millions of videos worldwide begin talking about this phenomenon to the point where you can't escape it, to the point where every inch of your sponge brain soaks in fear, the chaos, the truth, unraveled, all-consuming, and terrifying. For every single person on this earth, this will cause an unexplainable, fervent pain. Firstly, because the fact that we will not be able to do anything about our imminent demise. We don't have the technology to be able to stop this from hurting everyone. We just empirically don't. We don't have the ability to stop an entire moving rock coming at us, to stop it from killing billions of people. They say that we have the incentive to work together, but they don't explain how we have the capacity as a human species. We are really not that smart. We really don't have that many resources. But even if we have things like bunkers, I think they're only going to be for the rich elite, which means that even then, billions of people are still going to die. This means that this makes us feel powerless, like our lives aren't ours, that we know that we will not be able to do anything but just face the fact that we will die in 3 months. Secondly, that we can't even enjoy the time that we have left. Because firstly, to be able to understand the poetic beauty of having 3 months left, you have to have a poetic mind. Not everyone thinks in the way that time is valuable and that you have to cherish every moment. Some people are just simplistic and think that dying is a bad thing and cannot see the beauty in that. But even then, not a lot of people have funds. As an average person, if you're going to dip into your savings to go onto that holiday that you really wanted to go onto, to be able to make something out of your life and not go onto your 9 to 5, it realistically looks like using $5,000 to go on a Ryanair flight to go to some all-inclusive resort in Spain. And when you realize sitting by the pool in 15 degrees that actually this wasn't worth it, that I used money that I've made over years for nothing, that actually I can't fill the hole in my heart that I know I'm going to die with any capitalistic desires. Lastly, death is going to seep into every interaction that you have. Anything that you think has meaning now is meaningless, because when you spend time with your friends, you know that you won't be able to do this ever again in 3 months. When you spend time on your hobbies, when you do debating, when you write an essay, you know that this is for nothing, because nobody is going to be able to see this again, and all of the energy and time that you put into things that you care about is going to inevitably be for absolutely nothing. Lastly, the thought of death is going to eat you alive. We are scared of the uncertain. As human beings, we like to know what comes tomorrow. And the only reason why we're not scared of death today is because it's unpredictable. We don't have to think about it. We can put it at the back of our minds, but now we know it's in 3 months. And the only thing we can do is be constantly reminded that death is coming for us, and we don't know what comes after. We are scared for ourselves because we spend so much of our lives caring for things, and that is going to be ripped away from us. Secondly, we're going to be surrounded by it all the time. This is all everyone is going to talk about because death is the most proximate thing to us. It takes away our lives. Therefore, on social media, on the street, like at the dinner table, it is the only thing you'll be surrounded by. Therefore, it plagues your thoughts. And lastly, nothing to you now has meaning. A pregnant woman now knowing that she won't be able to see the birth of her child. Before I move on, I'll take a POI.
Do you not think that all of this would be way worse when the meteor lands and people have no idea what's going on?
When the meteor lands, we all die, right? And we're only going to see the meteor like 3 hours before it happening. That is just empirically and scientifically true. Even if it's 3 weeks before, we're mitigating a lot of the harm that comes from the emotional suffering in the 3 months that we have to be living with this kind of information. But why does nothing have meaning? As a pregnant woman, you're never going to see your child be born. As a parent, you're never going to see your child grow up. For every time that you see a date on a calendar, you are reminded that your time is limited. This causes so much emotional stress and strain for you, where every moment of your life is reminded that it's going to end. This will cause a heavy feeling of guilt for this actor. They will blame you. They will scream at you on the street. They will say your name on social media. They will send you death threats. They will tell you you are the reason they are feeling this suffering. They want a face to blame. Therefore, they are going to go to the person that has given them this information that they cannot take out of their minds in the first place. But you will blame yourself. You internalize this regret and doubt you have. Your community and your family and friends that look at you weirdly, knowing that they can't take out this information that you have given them. I think that for every single person in this earth that has interest, this is going to affect them. Everyone has someone and something to love. For all those reasons, third, opposition.
Thank you for this debate going so well. I will now call upon Hugh Dunley to continue this debate.
Panel, every other speaker relies on the framing that we, the actor, are the only person with the power to actually reveal this information to the public. 3 reasons why I think the public are going to find out regardless. First of all, the European Space Agency aren't keeping this secret very well. They left this folder on a table, unguarded, unlocked, no one watching CCTV cameras, no do not open sign on the folder. I think due to this terrible security, someone finds out about it who isn't supposed to, they share it. 2, and most importantly, thousands of people study space and meteorites every single day in independent universities all across the world. Little James here studies astrology as a part of theoretical physics. I think one of them probably sees this huge chunk of rock hurtling towards us and goes, maybe that's bad. 3 then, I think the European Space Agency are actively sharing this information with people. That's why the information was on someone's desk. I also imagine they're probably sharing it with EU governments, maybe NASA to get a good response, but I'll give opposition the benefit of the doubt and say for some reason they don't want to tell the public. This means that more people are finding out about it. It is likely to leak out here since, first of all, if someone hears this, they're probably going to go and tell their loved ones who tell their loved ones. Why? Because we all care about our loved ones. 2, someone is going to eventually see an opportunity to make money here by selling it to a journalistic company. 3, a politician who's facing a population that maybe doesn't support them or an election that they could lose could use this for political gain by going I'm the only candidate who knows what's going on here, vote me. 4, who knows, maybe one of these people is actually a moral individual because of the reasons proposition approved and they'll go I'm going to share this with people. Just note though that while people find out, they find out about it later. So proposition's arguments are kind of mitigated to a degree, but the inverse is true for opposition since people have less time to deal with this information, so they have a bigger reaction for the reasons they have proven. Also, why will the public actually care about this? Now I talked about this, but it's quite intuitive. The majority of us care to some degree whether or not we live or die, and because we are reputable journalists, I think a lot of people are going to buy it. As a result then, I think because a lot of people are going to read about this, they're also going to know about the person who published this information. 2 comments then about the actor. Firstly, I think the actor, like most humans, enjoys to be happy and broadly enjoys to be alive, since we all kind of care about that. Judges, note, I don't know why the actor actually cares about what the rest of society goes through. Maybe they do, but I am unsure. No one in opposition has actually proven this. 2 then, the actor loves telling stories and informing the public. Modern journalism is pretty broke at the moment, due to Instagram and TikTok being the main source of news instead of people buying newspapers. Journalists aren't being paid that much, and if they wanted money, they'd go work for some evil corporation or whatever. This means a journalist does journalism because they love it. Now, why would someone love journalism? As a STEM student, I have no idea what humanity people actually think, but I think it's probably because they derive some sort of happiness from telling people what's going on, whatever. On top of that, I think the actor would rather think of themselves as a good journalist, since we all like being told, good boy, whatever. Okay, the actor will be far happier if we follow the straight path by publishing this. And I don't care really about the clash on whether or not we survive. I think it's broadly symmetric. I have 6 reasons why it is far more concrete on our side why we're going to be happier. Firstly, as said above, the actor derives happiness from sharing this information. We share it, we are happy. Yay. 2, fame. This story will instantly make us famous, as said earlier. This makes us happy for 2 distinct reasons. 1, we perceive ourselves to be a better journalist, since a good journalist is someone who's known for their journalism, known for sharing stories, whatever. We all like being told we are a good boy, as said earlier, so we are happy. 2 then, we get happy from being famous because humans get a sense of importance when they view themselves as famous, which translates into happiness. So again, happier if we publish it, yay.
Do you not think some bad person is going to maybe target the person who leaked the information that says the world's going to end? Someone who's wrong to end, just harass your family, possibly kill you?
Yeah, maybe they do, but I don't exactly know why that's true, and I'm going to prove why we, the actor, can mitigate this because we have more money, which is just what I'm going to get onto. Okay, we're going to get monetary gain from this. 3 ways I see this happening. First of all, if we publish it with the Mirish Times, they're going to get lots of clicks, lots of new subscribers, lots of money. Them being a company, they're going to reward us with a bonus, pay rise, promotion, etc., because they want to incentivize this from ourselves and other journalists. 2, with the fame I talked about earlier, we can use that to speak on a podcast, news show, chat show, etc., because I think people are just going to be really curious as to how exactly we came across this information. We can get money from from these. 3, the motion is this house would publish. It does not specify where we would publish it. In theory, the actor could publish it on social media, get followers, like, comments, etc., which leads to money on Instagram. Or even better, we could go one step further and post it on like some OnlyFans account where people are going to pay to subscribe. This has we could even then like post feed pics to make us richer. This has the added benefit of making Hist Council very happy since they love the ones I sent them in exchange for a spot in the final. Okay. With this money, we can then do 2 things. Firstly, embrace our inner consumerism and buy stuff that makes us happy. Hell, we have 3 months left. Let's buy a load of drugs and go out in a blaze of cocaine-fueled glory. 2, we can use that money to buy a bomb shelter, canned food, etc. This, at the very least, will make the actor think we have a better chance at surviving, or even avoids David Hellhole because, like, yeah, we can buy a bomb shelter, hide in there, whatever. So we are less doom and gloom for 3 months. We are happy. Yay. Fourthly, if humanity survives, I think humanity is heavily impacted. Why? I think someone proved this earlier, but like, the meteorite is coming to hit, and I think a meteorite that has a 75% chance of killing us, it's probably pretty big, it's probably moving pretty fast. So in the case that humanity survives, I think, you know, like there's a big tsunami from it hitting the sea, big dust cloud, whatever. In this outcome, the actor is either going to die or survive. If we die and humanity survives, I think the actor will imagine that we're going to be seen as a heroic figure if we publish it. Why? We are the ones that told humanity they are doomed. We are the ones that told them to plan for this catastrophe. So they did, and they survived, partly because we gave them that warning and gave them 3 months to plan for it. That is important because of my framing. And then in the outcome where we do survive and don't publish it, I think the actor is going to wish we would have published it because then, like, people would have had more time to prepare, higher chance they would have survived, maybe they stocked more food, etc. Therefore, we blame ourselves for the deaths that they had. We are unhappy with our actions and we are sad. In either outcome, if we publish it, we are happy. Yay. Fifthly, it's tinfoil hat conspiracy theory time, ladies and gentlemen. The actor is doing a piece on the European Space Agency. They probably know about them, such as the fact they constantly monitor all meteorites in the solar system. The actor probably knows like NASA and other space agencies do this as well, so they can plan ahead and that they can roughly like model these meteorites because, you know, the meteorites follow the laws of physics or whatever. The actor will then wonder why we, the public, have never heard of this meteorite that has a chance of killing us. What is the answer the actor is going to come up with? A global conspiracy. Notice this doesn't actually have to be true, but I think this is a logical conclusion that an actor is going to consider, especially because they're a journalist that sees the bad in things, which maybe involves like the US government, the Illuminati, and even his sugar daddy Deloitte, who I did not know would be in the room here. Okay, and the actor is then going to get a sense of justice by revealing this information, and they're going to be happy. Yay. Sixthly, religion. This flips what first op said. 3 reasons why I think a lot of people are going to join religions. 1, people are likely going to feel lost, confused, maybe angry. Religion are going to offer like some sort of explanation, e.g. like God is smiting us, which is going to give people like some degree of comfort. 2, then, people who may be agnostic or not that religious will go like, I'm going to die in 3 months. There may be a heaven, I'd like to ensure that I get there. Only in God can that happen. 3, then, humans just generally seek answers in religion. This is historically true. This is why the Greeks believed in Zeus and co, because they explain like natural phenomenon they couldn't. I think the same logic applies here. So people will then join these religions. They're probably going to join like legitimate religions as opposed to fringe cults, since I think the majority of the population has very bad views of these cults for like historical reasons. Now, why does that make the actor happy? 2 reasons. 1, people go around helping other people because that's what a lot of religions preach, like get into heaven or the good place, whatever. So then the actor is going to be happy because they see people doing good things because I made the choice to reveal it. 2, then, the actor themselves is probably going to join a religion for the same reason. They're going to be happy that other people are like, quote unquote, like saving themselves because of what the actor did. So again, the actor is happy. Too quickly wait, I don't know why the actor cares about most of the arguments in the debate, since neither side have proven why the actor cares about good for society. Thank you.
Thank you very much for completing the proposition. I will now call upon Jose Kushida to conclude the case of the proposition.
I want to start off this speech by explaining what this debate isn't about. Firstly, this debate is not about whether or not we can stop this meteor for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the agency has probably already tried coordinating efforts with government agencies to try to stop the meteor from making an impact. That is, a meteor barreling straight towards you is pretty hard to miss if you're NASA or some other government agency, which means that everyone who needs to know about this will probably know about this, and they've already tried to stop this. Second, even if they just found out about this, 3 months is not a very long time to prevent a catastrophe. It took us over a year to develop a vaccine for COVID. Think about how long it would take for us to get rid of a massive barreling rock. Thirdly then, Even worse, I want to flip Proposition's argument, because I would say it becomes far, far harder for governments to coordinate efforts to stop this meteor on their side. Because guess what happens when society riots, society panics, and society is in terror? We think it is a lot harder for the government to control the society and, stopping the meteor on their side. We think it is far better when the government doesn't have to worry about, riots and whatnot. So this means on their side, they're far less likely going to develop, stop this meteor in the long term. Secondly then, this debate isn't about supply chains or whatnot, because we think that Opposition 2 makes the mistake of making the arbitrary judgment to say that the receiver's right to access electricity is more important than the service workers' supposed right to see their loved ones. So I think it is ultimately inconsequential in this debate. Lastly then, I think it's not about whether or not the public will know about this information, because I think Hugh correctly points this out. There are a lot of different ways that the public can ascertain and can get access to this information. For instance, the fact that some little kids might have a telescope in their room and see that there's a meteor barreling straight towards them. The fact that aside from the European Space Agency, that Japan, Russia, or the US could find this meteor and inform the public. This all means that it is likely that people are going to know about this information on either side, and this means that all the other arguments coming from opposition are inconsequential because they rely on people knowing about this information, and that is probably not important in this debate. So ultimately, then, it is about whether or not you, as an individual, should release this information, and not government agencies or other people. I think there are three specific reasons as to why you as an individual should not release this information as a journalist. First is that as a journalist, you should probably know what you're talking about, right? The entire basis of each case is that you report on this accurately. But I want you to really critically think about it. You were probably in the European Space Agency for, half an hour max. You probably skimmed through the paper within 5 minutes. You have no idea as to what the detailed scientific and specific studies were. This means that the likelihood is that you do not have access to all of the information, and you do not have access to the full story. The issue here is that when you do not give the full story to the public, that is more likely going to end in the bad impact that opposition wanted to talk about. This proves as to why my bench's arguments are more important. But more importantly, we think that government agencies and other more legitimate actors have better expertise, because you as a journalist probably graduated with something useless like philosophy, so you have no idea as to what this asteroid and what math actually is, right? So we would rather leave the release of this information to people who are actually expertise, who are actually experts, and who actually know what they're talking about. Secondly, I think there's a difference between natural and human harms, because there's a difference between informing individuals of human-made evils. That is, if there was a genocide going on, if someone was committing atrocities, we think that we have an obligation to report on that. What we don't have an obligation to do then is to report natural harms. That is, things that we have no control over, things that were ultimately not human-made. Lastly then, I want to talk about the potential good that you get from releasing this information versus the potential bad that you may get, which is people get to say goodbye to their loved ones, and on our side it is the fact that you may panic and society may collapse, right? Here's the way you should weigh this up. We think that you have an obligation to prevent harm, but you do not have the symmetric obligation to promote good. That is, we think we should stop individuals from getting killed or being stabbed on the street, or we should inform individuals when they're going to die. We think of an obligation to stop harm from happening, but we do not have the obligation to symmetrically promote good in society. That is, while we may have an obligation to prevent harm, we also do not have the opposite obligation to, for example, do things like donate to charity or do other things, because we think these are optional obligations. So ultimately what you should buy here is that our obligations are unbalanced. On their side, you may or may not cause a good, but we don't think you have an obligation to promote this. On our side, what is sure is that there will be harm, some people will panic, and we think that obligation is the most important. So therefore, this all means as to why you as an individual should not control as to whether or not this information comes out. I'll take that point.
It's not as certain that it'll cause bad as it'll cause good. There's just as much chance of everyone reacting in a positive way and seeking out their loved ones than there is.
Obviously, we're not all a monolith, right? Different people are going to react different ways. Some people might panic, some people may say goodbye. But what is clear is that we should prioritize those who panic over those who have the capacity to cherish those, because we think it is important that we minimize suffering as much as possible, and even if it comes at the cost of promoting good to some individuals. We think here's how you should credit this argument then. All of the opposition bench's arguments so far are useless if you believe that people are going to find out about this information anyways. So what is ultimately important and what is the ultimate question in this debate is as to whether you as the individual should release this information. For all the reasons I gave above, which is that one, you are unlikely going to have the true story, you're likely going to report on it badly, and therefore it ends in worse practical consequences for society. We think that is already a good enough reason for you to not publish it. We think you should give it to the government or someone who is better. Second, the fact that we have the fact that they're asymmetric and there are different obligations on either side means you should vote for us. I want to talk about what the counterfactual looks like, right? And I want you to imagine it, because on our side, we think that it is likely that people are going to find out anyways, whether that be from the various news agencies or whether the various space agencies. What we think this is still far better than us as an individual informing the public, because we think that space agencies know what they're talking about, know how to deliver the information in a proper way, and have an obligation to report to the public, because it is us who voted them in. We as a journalist are not beholden to the public. We as a journalist should do what is best for us and what is the most responsible for us to do as journalists. So this all means as to why on our side we should probably not release this information ourselves. This should weigh directly over Hugh's argument, because all of Hugh's arguments are way too speculative, right? Why do podcasts and fame matter if you may die in 3 months? And why does your joy matter more than the collective good of society? We think that if what ultimately comes from you releasing this information is panic, terror, and general misinformation, we think you ought not to do it, even if you become famous, because that is an immoral thing to do. For these reasons, I'm very, very proud to oppose.
Something that doesn't happen to me often when I talk here. It prompted me to actually write an entire second speech to give instead of the first speech. I have to figure out which one I'm going to give now. Give me a moment. Second speech. Okay. So I was there are a number of different angles I thought I could take in talking about this. One of them is the question, would anyone actually notice if the Irish Times published news about the end of the world? One of them is the question of, would the media and the world ever actually grow a pair, which, given the endless ability of the BBC to keep licking the Tory boot that keeps kicking in the face, I tend to doubt. I have a whole riff on the ethics of snooping that I thought would be fun to talk about, but actually I want to talk about a different angle, and it was one I think that was specifically come before to hear mention of the fascinating case of the War of the Worlds example, and the way in which it did get very much overblown in the telling afterwards. There have been other cases like that. The famous case of Kitty Genovese, some of you may have heard of, the case of the woman who was allegedly dragged off and raped and murdered within the spotlight of many people who failed to do anything to stop it. It did provoke a creation of a wonderful song. I hope people, Phil Oak's wonderful song outside of the small circle of friends. Look outside the window, there's a woman being dragged. They dragged her to the bushes, and now she's being stabbed. Maybe we should call the cops and try to stop the pain. But Monopoly is so much fun, I'd hate to blow the game, and I'm sure it would have interest anybody outside of the small circle of friends. Wonderful song. But unfortunately, again, it's not completely grounded in reality, because it turns out that the facts were not nearly as clear about there being many people in a position who had any idea about what was going on there. So, but I think this is part of a general pattern that one sees in politics there, and I think you see it continually. Which is the last thing that you want to do is actually get most people involved. Leave most people out of it. Leave it to the people who know. They'll know what they're doing. If you let most ordinary people get involved, then in the immortal words of the movie Ghostbusters, you're going to see 40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes, the dead rising from the grave, human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. And we keep hearing the story. I've heard the song many, many, many times. In fact, it's one of the most important songs that we've been hearing in politics. since 1945, if not before. And it's one which is one of the more fascinatingly self-serving exercises in political storytelling, I think, that you'll ever hear. So I want to poke on it a little bit there and see, why do we keep telling ourselves this story that the last thing in the world we want to do is get ordinary people involved? Well, you can say a lot of good reasons why it started after then, because a lot of people wanted to explain why everything that happened before 1945 happened. And one of the answers they came up with is that Nazi Germany represented what happened when you get too much democracy. And if that's a story that makes sense to you, I'm guessing that you haven't finished drinking your ivermectin stash from COVID. But it was a very common story, and you can see why, I don't know, people in the Federal Republic of Germany would buy it. It's like, why would this happen? Well, it couldn't have been because German political conservatives thought Hitler would be easy to work with. It couldn't be because the Roman Catholic Church just tried to make a deal with Hitler. Couldn't be because the socialists and the communists stuck their heads up their respective asses. It has to be because of the ordinary Germans who never elected Hitler to anything in any election that Hitler did not control. Now let's blame them. Because for us, you can see why the West German political elites would have been determined to say that afterwards. But we kept hearing this story for many, many years throughout the Cold War. It's like, don't just leave the irresponsible people in charge and let them be the ones to make the decision. Don't trust ordinary people. Don't tell them the facts. They wouldn't be able to get the answer right there. And you've heard this again and again. You got to hear this one during Vietnam, in fact, there was a wonderful Jules Feiffer cartoon about after the Vietnam War ended. Now let's find out who lost Vietnam. And President Eisenhower said, oh, not me, I just had advisors. And President Jack said, oh, not me, I just had to keep troops. And President Johnson said, oh, not me, I just followed Jack. And Nixon says, oh, not me, I was just honoring Lyndon's commitment. And President Ford says, oh, not me, what was the question again? And the punchline is, well, the American people lost the war because you didn't have any faith in your leaders there. That's right, you didn't trust these idiots. Actually, that's what caused the whole problem. And you see all this thing play out again when the September 11th attacks happened, which was before we were all born. Anyway, when the September 11th attacks happened, there was again the story that don't tell, you can't get ordinary people involved. Don't tell them the truth. They won't get the answer right, of course. You should trust to our leaders. Leaders like President George W. Bush, the man who had like the sort of political acumen of the average orangutan. Many of you may not know the story of what George W. Bush was doing when he was first confronted with the reality that the U.S. was under attack during the war there. He was actually visiting a kindergarten classroom there, listening to little children there. And then you actually, this is on video, you can see the people actually come in to tell him that the World Center has fallen, the second tower has been hit, and the United States is under attack. And he immediately sprang up from his seat and said, sorry children, my country needs me. No, he didn't do that. Instead, what he did is he sat in the chair, and this is on film for several minutes, of him sitting in the chair looking not unlike a deer staring into the headlights of the car, while little child after little child reads to him pages from My Pet Goat. What you see there is what should have been the implosion of the case that had been made for years of the national security state. The national security state has to be able to do things. We can't rely on those democratic guys. You don't get most people involved. You need like a decisive leader to spring into action. And those decisive leaders did approximately diddly squat on the day in September 11th to say and do anything useful. The only people who did anything useful on September 11th on the day, as many of you may know, were the people on United Flight 87, who were the ordinary people on the plane who stormed the cockpit, took out the suicide bombers, crashed the plane, and thereby prevented it probably from crashing at the White House, as they said. And a lot of people would say, gosh, it looks like you can actually trust the ordinary people to do a lot in a jam when they are given the opportunity. But yes, despite all of this, the story just continues not to die. You hear it again and again and again and again. And people usually invoke the image of Plato and the noble lie and all of that. Well, I like to teach Plato. And there's one of the fascinating things you see about Plato. It's true, Plato didn't think much of the ordinary people. But you know who else Plato didn't think very much of? Oh, he thought most elites were amazingly stupid, self-serving assholes there. And it's like, and when you're in a world where you have self-serving billionaire, or after self-serving billionaire, or after self-serving billionaire, or after self-serving billionaire, After another, treating the world like it's a personal goddamn toy, I think you might have a point there, that maybe that leaving it to them is not necessarily the best thing. Indeed, perhaps one of the reasons why these people seem to command as much of a following as they do is because there are a lot of people in the country who are sick to not being listened to, and they think, this guy might have the IQ of a termite, but at least he's listening to me. Maybe the lesson we should come away from the past 80 years is that the idea that just saying, oh, leave it to us, leave it to us, leave it to us, don't trust ordinary people, we can't actually get them involved, is going to get you only so far before it bites you in the ass. And so I would just conclude by evoking the wonderful description of democracy that comes from the scholar of ancient Athens, Josiah Ober, when he said that what democracy is all about in the end, it's about harnessing the collective power, the kratos of the demos, to do things. That's what democracy is all about. When we all come together to be able to make good things happen, to stop, to deal with our dangers, to deal with crises, to deal with catastrophes together. And that is a lesson that sadly, I think, has been neglected for all too long in politics over the last 80 years. And how does this relate to the proposition? Well, it's like they say in the math textbook, I will leave that as an exercise for the reader. Thank you.